The first time a Mafia boss offered me money to pretend I was his mate, I laughed because the alternative was admitting I was desperate enough to consider it. One night, the man across from me said, "You attend one event at my side, convince everyone in the room that you belong there, and walk away with $25,000. Adrian Vale did not look like someone who expected to repeat himself. He sat behind a black glass desk in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything I owned, one hand resting beside an untouched cup of coffee. No guards crowded the office. He didn't need them. The silence around him did the job. I looked at the contract between us, then at the final notice folded inside my jacket pocket. My landlord had given me 5 days. My checking account had given me considerably less. "You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend?" I asked. Adrian's expression didn't move. "My mate. Right. Much more normal." His eyes settled on me with the patience of a man deciding whether sarcasm was a medical condition. "You were told what this meeting concerned." "I was told it was private hospitality work." "It is. Most hospitality jobs don't require me to fake a lifelong biological bond with organized crime." One corner of his mouth shifted. Not a smile. More like the idea of one had passed through security and been denied entry. 3 hours earlier, I had been standing behind the counter of the hotel cafe where I worked mornings, calculating which bill could survive being ignored. Rent was already late. My car needed a new alternator. The collection agency handling my mother's remaining medical debt had called twice before breakfast. I had answered neither time, which was technically a financial strategy if you were willing to lower your standards. Then a woman in a navy coat had ordered an espresso, watched me defuse an argument between 2 guests, and left a card beneath her receipt. Discreet private engagement. 1 evening. Exceptional compensation. I had almost thrown it away. Then my landlord texted a photo of the eviction paperwork. Character had brought me to Adrian Vale's office. Desperation had merely paid for the ride. "Why me?" I asked. "You're not connected to any family in my organization. You have no public history with me, no ambitions in my world, and no obvious reason to betray the arrangement. That is a remarkably flattering list. You also remained calm when 2 men nearly started a fight in your cafe. They were arguing over oat milk. They were armed." I paused. That part was less visible from behind the pastry case. Adrian slid the contract toward me. "Tomorrow night, several people whose cooperation matters to me will attend a private reception. They expect me to arrive with a mate. Do you usually rent one?" His gaze sharpened. "No." That single word closed a door I hadn't realized I was pushing on. I looked down at the first page. The terms were brutally clean. I would attend the reception. I would follow security instructions. I would present myself as Adrian's committed mate. The agreement ended at 8 the following morning. Payment would be transferred immediately after the event. No future obligation. No public interviews. No discussion of anything I witnessed. "Physical contact?" I asked, as required to make the role credible. I pushed the contract back an inch. "That's not an answer." For the first time, Adrian leaned forward. He didn't loom. He didn't raise his voice. Somehow that made him more dangerous. "What answer do you require?" "You don't touch me without warning. No kissing unless we discuss it first. No private room theatrics. No surprise claims in front of people. And no changing the deal halfway through because you decide 25 grand bought the deluxe package." The room went very still. Adrian studied me as if I had become a problem more interesting than the one he had hired me to solve. "You assume I would ignore your boundaries. I assume powerful men are often shocked to discover other people have them." His eyes held mine for another second. Then he took a pen, crossed out 1 paragraph, and wrote a new condition in the margin. "All physical contact subject to prior agreement or immediate necessity for safety." He initialed it and turned the contract back to me. "Acceptable." I read the line twice. The easy move would have been to sign immediately. $25,000 could save my apartment, repair my car, and silence the collection calls long enough for me to breathe. The harder truth was that money did not make this safe. Adrian Vale could make 1 phone call and rearrange my entire life. If I signed, I would be stepping into a room full of people who knew exactly what his attention was worth. But he had changed the contract when I challenged him. Not because I had power, because, for reasons I didn't yet understand, he wanted my cooperation more than my obedience. "I have one more condition," I said. His brows lifted slightly. I get the full reason you need this act before tomorrow night. Not every criminal detail. Just enough to know what I'm walking into and what happens if someone doesn't believe us. Reasonable. And if I say stop, the performance stops. Unless stopping places you in immediate danger. Then you explain while saving my life. That almost smile returned, quicker this time. You negotiate aggressively for a man with an eviction notice in his pocket. My hand went still. Adrian glanced at the edge of the folded paper visible beneath my jacket, not at my face. He had noticed. Of course he had. Heat climbed my neck, sharp and humiliating. That isn't permission to pity me. I don't. His answer came without hesitation. Need is not weakness, Evan. Pretending otherwise is usually expensive. I hated that the sentence landed. I hated more that it sounded like experience. I picked up the pen. My signature looked steadier than I felt. Adrian took the contract, added his own name beneath mine, and closed the folder. Just like that, the air changed. I was no longer a broke cafe worker listening to an absurd proposal. I was Adrian Vale's temporary mate, at least on paper, and tomorrow night I would have to convince a room full of dangerous people that the most controlled man I had ever met trusted me close enough to touch. Adrian stood and buttoned his jacket. A car will collect you at 10 tomorrow morning. The event is at night. You require preparation. For what? Walking beside you and looking emotionally unavailable. He moved around the desk and stopped a respectful distance away. For making people who have known me for 20 years believe I chose you. My joke died before it reached my mouth. Adrian opened the office door. Get some sleep, Evan. Is that an order? He looked at me, calm and unreadable. For now, it's advice. I stepped into the hallway with a signed contract, a future rent payment, and the uncomfortable feeling that I had just sold one night of my life to a man who had already started paying attention to everything I tried to hide. At 10 the next morning, a black sedan waited outside my apartment like it had taken one look at the peeling brick and decided not to judge me out loud. The driver opened the rear door before I reached the curb. Mr. Cole. I glanced behind me, just in case a wealthier Mr. Cole had materialized. That's unsettlingly formal. He did not smile. Apparently, Adrian's employees had signed a separate contract banning joy. 20 minutes later, the car carried me into a private garage beneath a downtown tower. I expected armed men, marble floors, maybe a decorative shark tank. Instead, I was escorted into a quiet suite with soft gray walls, racks of clothing, and a long table covered in folders. Adrian stood near the windows in shirt sleeves, reading from a tablet. No jacket, no tie. Somehow that made him look more dangerous, not less. You're early, he said. Your driver obeys traffic laws aggressively. Adrian looked at the clock. You're 3 minutes early. I apologize for disrupting the criminal schedule. His gaze lifted. There it was again, that brief, almost smile, gone before I could be sure it existed. A woman named Nora introduced herself as Adrian's operations director. She had the calm expression of someone who had buried at least 6 disasters before breakfast. She handed me a slim folder. Tonight's reception is at the Marlowe house. Private guest list. No press. You'll be introduced as Adrian's maid of 4 months. For months. I looked at Adrian. Last night, I didn't know his coffee order. Black, Adrian said. No sugar. I was making a point. Nora continued as if this was normal. You met through a mutual contact. You've kept the relationship private because Adrian values discretion and emotional accessibility, I added. Naturally. Adrian's voice was dry enough to preserve fruit. The folder contained names, photographs, and short descriptions. Most were business associates. A few were clearly something else. I skimmed until I found the section marked behavior. Hand placement. I asked. Necessary, Adrian said. That sounds like a man who has never been asked where his hands are going. He set down the tablet. Then asked. The directness caught me off guard. I looked at him, waiting for the hidden condition. He waited back. Fine, I said. If we're standing, hand at my lower back is acceptable. Waist only if I know it's coming. Don't grab my neck. Something unreadable passed through his face at that last one. Understood. And no answering personal questions for me. If someone asks something designed to expose you, give me the chance to lie first. Nora coughed into her fist. Adrian looked at her. She looked at the folder. I was beginning to suspect she had a sense of humor and valued her employment too much to use it. The next hour should have been simple. It was not. Adrian treated fake intimacy like a military operation. We practiced entrances, introductions, and the basic history of our fictional relationship. Every detail was precise. We supposedly met at a charity auction. I disliked the champagne. Adrian noticed. We argued about whether modern art needed to look like something. He asked me to dinner 2 days later. You invited me to dinner after I insulted the art. I asked. It made you memorable. That is almost romantic. It is efficient. There he is. By noon, Nora left us to practice without an audience. Adrian moved closer. At the reception, people will watch whether you anticipate me. That sounds exhausting. It is how they determine intimacy. Normal couples usually just share streaming passwords. Those can be purchased. You truly make everything sinister. He ignored that. If I shift toward the exit, you move with me. If I touch your back twice, we leave immediately. If I say your full name, stop speaking. That last one feels personal. It means the conversation has become unsafe. His tone changed slightly, not colder, but firmer. That was the first moment the performance stopped feeling amusing. Unsafe how? I asked. Someone testing the story. Someone trying to provoke me. Someone deciding whether you can be used to influence my judgment. I folded my arms. And what happens if they decide I can? Adrian went still. They will be corrected. It was not a threat delivered for effect. That made it worse. I held his gaze. You said I'd get enough information to know what I'm walking into. You are walking into a room where every relationship is evaluated for leverage. I need them to believe mine is not available for negotiation. So I'm a warning sign. Tonight, you are evidence. The word landed badly. Adrian saw it. His eyes dropped briefly to my crossed arms, then returned to my face. That was poorly phrased. I blinked. Did you just admit that? Don't make it ceremonial. I was going to order a plaque. He exhaled through his nose. Not quite a laugh, but close enough to count. Then he stepped nearer and lifted one hand, stopping before touching me. Lower back, he asked. The question mattered more than it should have. I nodded. His palms settled against me with controlled warmth. No surprise. No pressure. Just contact, exactly where we had agreed. My body still reacted before my pride could intervene. Every muscle in my back noticed him. So did the part of my brain responsible for bad decisions. You're tense, Adrian said. You're a mafia boss with your hand on me. You agreed to both facts. Separately, they seemed more manageable. This time, the corner of his mouth actually moved. Look at me. I did. The room became too quiet. Adrian's expression stayed composed, but his attention felt total. Not performative. Not casual. He shifted half a step, and I followed without thinking. His eyes sharpened. Good. I stepped away before my nervous system signed an amendment to the contract. That was practice. Yes. Your face says otherwise. My face says nothing. Your face has a very controlling vocabulary. He let that pass. We ran the sequence again. Then again. Each time, the movement became smoother. I learned that Adrian gave warning through tiny changes. A glance toward a door, a shift in his shoulders, the slightest pressure of his fingers. He learned that if he gave me information instead of commands, I could adapt faster than his carefully rehearsed plan. By late afternoon, the clothes had been fitted, the cover story memorized, and our signals reduced to something almost instinctive. I stood before the mirror in a dark suit tailored close enough to make me question every meal I had eaten since high school. Adrian appeared behind me, already dressed for the evening. You look uncomfortable, he said. I look expensive. It's different. You look convincing. I met his eyes in the mirror. As your mate. As someone who belongs beside me. For once, I had no joke ready. Adrian looked away first, adjusting one cuff with unnecessary precision. Nora opened the door and told us the car was waiting. I took one breath, then another. Yesterday, this had been a ridiculous offer from a dangerous stranger. Now I knew how Adrian moved, how he signaled, and exactly where his hand would rest when the room started watching. What I did not know was whether all that preparation would help us keep the performance under control or make it harder to remember it was only supposed to be one. By the time the car stopped beneath the white stone entrance of Marlowe House, I had repeated our fake history so many times I almost remembered attending an art auction that had never happened. Adrian glanced at me from the other side of the back seat. You're tapping your thumb. I looked down. He was right. That's how I process expensive mistakes. You haven't made one yet. Comforting choice of wording. Outside, Men in dark coats checked names beneath a row of brass lamps. Through the tall windows, I could see crystal, black suits, and the kind of people who smiled without relaxing any part of their faces. Adrian opened his door, then paused. Once we enter, stay close. Because I'm your mate? Because everyone inside will be measuring the distance between us. He stepped out. I followed, and before the nearest guard could look too closely, Adrian offered his hand. Not a command, not a surprise, an invitation. I took it. The effect was immediate. Conversations near the entrance softened. Heads turned. Adrian's fingers closed around mine with calm certainty, and I understood what Nora had meant. In this room, affection was not private. It was evidence. The lobby opened into a ballroom lined with dark wood and gold-framed portraits. A string quartet played near the staircase, almost loud enough to cover the calculations happening beneath every greeting. Adrian's hand moved to my lower back exactly where we had agreed. My body still reacted as though the contract had failed to notify it. "Breathe," he murmured. "I am breathing. Not efficiently. You manage crime. I manage oxygen." His thumb pressed once against my jacket. Not one of our signals. Just enough contact to steady me. Then the first couple approached. The man introduced himself as Victor Hale, smiling at Adrian while studying me. His wife, Elise, wore diamonds sharp enough to qualify as weapons. "For months," Victor said after Adrian presented me. "You've kept him very quiet." "I value privacy," Adrian replied. Elise turned to me. "And how did you manage to hold Adrian Vale's attention?" It was the sort of question that looked harmless until you noticed the trap. If I praised his power, I sounded bought. If I made a joke of him, I undermined the image. Adrian's hand stayed warm against my back, waiting. "I disagreed with him about a painting," I said. "He mistook irritation for chemistry." Victor laughed. Elise did not. Adrian looked down at me, his face composed. "You insulted the painting for 20 minutes. It deserved a fair trial." The answer came easily. Too easily. Adrian's gaze held mine a beat longer than necessary, and something in Elise's expression shifted. Doubt became interest. We moved on. "You changed the story," Adrian said quietly. "I improved it. You implied I pursued you because you annoyed me. Did you want believable or flattering?" His fingers adjusted at my back. Believable. That tiny concession felt better than it should have. For the next hour, we became a machine built out of eye contact and carefully measured. Touch. Adrian introduced me without hesitation. I remembered names, laughed when expected, and redirected questions that wandered too close to business. When he shifted toward an exit, I moved with him. When my attention drifted, he brought me back with the smallest pressure of his hand. The performance stopped feeling like memorized steps. It became rhythm. Then a silver-haired man named Grant Mercer decided to test it. "Adrian never mentioned you," he said, blocking our path near the bar. His voice was friendly. His eyes were not. "That's because Adrian's hobbies include secrecy and making conversations uncomfortable," I said. Grant smiled. "And yours?" "Apparently, volunteering for both." Adrian's mouth almost betrayed him. Grant noticed. "You're very relaxed for someone new to this world." I wasn't. My pulse was hitting hard enough to file a complaint. But Adrian had taught me something useful. Powerful people often mistook stillness for confidence. "I'm standing beside the most dangerous man in the room," I said. "Why would I be nervous?" Grant's attention moved to Adrian. "That confidence assumes he'll protect you." The room around us seemed to narrow. Adrian's hand left my back. For half a second, I thought I had misjudged everything. Then he stepped between us, not dramatically, just enough to change the balance. "It doesn't assume anything," Adrian said. "It knows." The words were quiet. Grant's smile disappeared. Adrian did not touch him, threaten him, or raise his voice. He simply waited until Grant moved aside. Only then did his hand return to me. "Was that necessary?" I asked when we were out of earshot. "Yes." "For the performance?" Adrian looked straight ahead. "Keep walking." Not an answer. Which was an answer. Later, when the room had grown warmer and the champagne had made everyone less careful, Adrian was pulled into a conversation with 3 men near the fireplace. I stayed close, listening. One of them dismissed a staff member with a sharp gesture after spilling his own drink. The young server crouched to collect the broken glass while the men continued talking over him. I bent down to help. "Leave it," Adrian said. I looked up. His expression was unreadable. "He'll cut himself." The server stared between us, terrified that my kindness had become a political event. I picked up the largest piece with a napkin. Adrian went silent. Then he crouched beside me. The entire conversation behind us stopped. He took the remaining shards from the server's reach and told him to get a dustpan. No anger. No spectacle. Just action. When we stood, Adrian's gaze settled on me. You could have been hurt. So could he. He has staff trained for that. He is the staff. Something shifted in Adrian's face. Not annoyance. Recognition. You don't know how to ignore people, he said. I've had less practice. For the first time that night, he smiled without fighting it. Small, brief, real. The room vanished around the edges. That was the dangerous moment. Not Grant Mercer. Not the armed guards or the whispered deals. Adrian Vale smiling at me like I had surprised him was far more difficult to treat as part of a contract. The reception ended just after midnight. In the car, neither of us spoke for several blocks. There was no audience now. No reason for his hand to remain beside mine on the seat, close enough that our knuckles touched whenever the car turned. He didn't move away. Neither did I. They believed us. I said finally. Yes. Because I'm an exceptional actor. You forgot our anniversary month twice. Details. Adrian looked out the window, but I saw the faint curve at the corner of his mouth. You were convincing when it mattered. So were you. His eyes returned to mine. The space between us changed again, quieter than the ballroom, harder to hide inside. For one reckless second, I wondered what Adrian looked like when he wasn't performing control for anyone, including himself. Then the car descended into the private garage, and the moment broke. The reception was over. The job was nearly finished. By morning, I would take the money, walk away, and return to the life I understood. That was the plan. The problem was, somewhere between his hand at my back and the way he had stepped between me and Grant, pretending had started to feel less like a lie. The elevator ride up from the garage was quiet. Enough for me to hear the faint buzz of the lights overhead and every bad decision my body was considering. Adrian stood beside me, close but not touching. Without the ballroom, the music, and 50 pairs of calculating eyes, the distance between us felt less like safety and more like something neither of us knew how to cross. The doors opened directly into his penthouse. I had expected marble, glass, and enough cold furniture to discourage human attachment. I was mostly right. The city stretched beyond the windows in silver and black, while the living room looked arranged for photographs instead of people. Adrian removed his jacket and placed it over the back of a chair. You did well tonight. That almost sounded like praise. It was praise. I'm going to need a minute. He walked toward the kitchen. Water. Do Mafia bosses normally offer hydration after emotionally manipulating a room full of rich people? Only the successful ones. That earned a laugh before I could stop it. The sound felt too personal in the empty apartment. Adrian glanced back at me, and for a second, neither of us seemed to know what to do with the fact that I was no longer performing. He poured 2 glasses anyway. I loosened my tie and sat at the edge of the couch, careful not to disturb whatever museum rule protected it. My feet hurt. My face hurt from smiling. The spot on my lower back where Adrian's hand had rested seemed to have developed its own memory. He handed me the water, then noticed me shifting inside my shoes. Take them off. I looked up. Is that advice? Yes. You're making progress. I slipped them off and nearly sighed. Adrian disappeared down the hall without explanation. When he returned, he carried a small first aid kit. What happened? I asked. Your heel. I twisted my foot and saw a thin red line where the stiff leather had rubbed through the skin. That barely qualifies as an injury. It's bleeding. You say that like I've been shot. You have not been shot. Another successful evening. He crouched in front of me before I could object, then stopped with the antiseptic wipe still sealed in his hand. May I? The question landed harder than the gesture. He had asked before touching me all day because the contract required it. Now the event was over. No audience. No strategic benefit. I nodded. Adrian held my ankle with careful fingers and cleaned the scrape as if the tiny cut deserved the same attention he gave armed threats. It should have been absurd. Instead, I sat too still, watching a man feared by half the city press a bandage against my heel. You don't have to do this, I said. I know. Then why are you? His hands paused. Because you're hurt. The answer was simple enough to be dangerous. I looked away toward the windows. You know the agreement ends in a few hours. At 8. Right. I drank half the water too quickly. Then I become somebody else's problem. Adrian stood. Is that what you believe? I believe contracts are easier when everyone respects the ending. That wasn't my question. It was the answer you're getting. His expression closed slightly, but he did not push. He returned the first aid kit to the counter and checked his phone. The payment has been authorized. It will clear before morning. Relief moved through me so fast it almost hurt. Rent. The car. The calls I could finally return without calculating which lie sounded least pathetic. Thank you, I said, then immediately hated how small the words felt. Adrian looked at me. You fulfilled the agreement. You don't owe me gratitude. That should have made everything simpler. It didn't. I set the glass down and reached for my shoes. I should go. You can stay until the car is ready. The car that brought me here seems emotionally attached to punctuality. The driver is resting. Of course he is. Crime apparently has excellent labor policies. Adrian's mouth shifted, but the humor faded quickly. You don't have to leave tonight. I froze with one shoe in my hand. He continued before I could misread it. The guest room is prepared. You can leave in the morning when the agreement formally ends. That sounds dangerously close to hospitality. You mentioned your feet. My apartment has ice. Your apartment also has an eviction notice. Heat rose into my face. Adrian's gaze softened by a degree. I'm not using it. Against you. You're still using it. Fair. The immediate acknowledgement took some of the fight out of me. I hated that too. After a moment, I put the shoe back down. Guest room. Door closes. No surprise debriefing at 3 in the morning. Agreed. He showed me down a quiet hall to a room larger than my apartment's living area. Fresh clothes had been placed on the bed, plain t-shirt, soft pants, everything close enough to my size to suggest someone had planned ahead. You prepare for every possibility? I asked. Most. That must be exhausting. Adrian's eyes held mine. It is. There was no joke in the answer. No performance either. Just a glimpse of the man underneath all that control. Then he stepped back. Good night, Evan. Good night, Adrian. Hearing his first name in the empty hall changed something small and undeniable between us. He seemed to notice. He left without comment and closed the door gently behind him. I should have slept. Instead, I lay awake thinking about his hand around my ankle, the way he had said I didn't owe him gratitude, and the quiet strain in his voice when he admitted control was exhausting. By sunrise, exhaustion finally pulled me under. I woke less than an hour later with heat crawling along the side of my neck. At first I blamed the unfamiliar pillow. Then the burning sharpened. I stumbled into the bathroom, turned on the light, and pulled my collar aside. A dark, curved mark rested just below my jaw, too precise to be a bruise and too vivid to have been there the night before. I touched it once. The skin pulsed beneath my fingers. Whatever had happened between Adrian and me during our one-night arrangement had not ended when the audience went home. The mark pulsed again under my fingertips, and every sensible thought in my head packed a bag and left. Adrian. My voice came out rough. I tried again, louder. Adrian. The bedroom door opened almost immediately. He entered wearing dark pants and a half-buttoned shirt, alert in a way that suggested sleep had never fully claimed him. His gaze went to my face, then followed my hand to my neck. Adrian stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. The color left him so subtly most people would have missed it. I didn't. What is it? I asked. He crossed the room in 3 controlled steps, then halted just outside my reach. Move your hand. That sounded like an order. Evan. Something in his voice stripped the joke out of me. I lowered my hand. Adrian stared at the dark curve beneath my jaw. His expression gave me almost nothing, but his breathing changed. One slow inhale. One slower exhale. Tell me what this is, I said. He lifted his hand, then stopped before touching me. May I? I nodded because apparently my survival instincts had become dependent on good manners. His fingers hovered near the mark without pressing. Heat spread through my skin anyway, sharp and immediate. Adrian pulled his hand back as if burned. It's a bond mark. The words made no sense at first. They were too large for the quiet bathroom. No, yes. We didn't bond. I'm aware. You hired me for one night. I'm also aware of that. His voice stayed calm, but the edges had gone rigid. I stepped away from the mirror. Did you know this could happen? No, did you do something? His eyes snapped to mine. No. The answer came fast enough to feel honest, but fear was not interested in evidence. You planned the room, the clothes, the car. You knew my debts before I told you. Forgive me if I'm having trouble believing anything around you happens by accident. Adrian went completely still. I did not arrange this. Then explain it. I can explain what it is. Not yet why it happened. That was not enough. My pulse climbed. The mark answered with another deep throb, and Adrian's attention dropped to it again. Stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like I've become a security problem. You have. The words hit hard. Adrian saw it happen. That was not a good choice of phrasing. You've had that issue before. He closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, his control had returned, but now I knew what it looked like when it cracked. A true bond mark is rare. It is recognized. If anyone from last night sees it, they will assume the relationship was real. It wasn't. The mark burned. I hated that my own body seemed to disagree. Adrian's jaw tightened. Whether they believe it was real is the immediate concern. Mine is whether I can go home. Silence. Small. Precise. Terrible. Adrian. Not yet. I laughed once because panic had nowhere else to go. That answer needs work. Until I know who is aware of this and whether the mark changes your risk level, you remain here. Remain. Temporarily. You're doing it again. Doing what? Taking a problem that happened to me and turning it into a decision you get to make. His face hardened, though not with anger. With fear disguised as authority. You were presented publicly as my mate. Now you carry my mark. Anyone who doubts the arrangement may see you as leverage. Then tell me the risk and let me decide. You don't have enough information. Whose fault is that? The question landed. Adrian looked toward the doorway. Nora is on her way. A physician as well. I didn't agree to a physician. You need the mark examined. I need coffee and my own clothes. Evan. There it is. I pointed at him. That tone that means you've already decided what happens next. Adrian's mouth flattened. You want me to pretend this is not dangerous? I want you to stop pretending danger gives you ownership. The bathroom went silent. For the first time since he entered, Adrian looked less like a mafia boss and more like a man standing in front of something he could not control. Then the mark pulsed again. A wave of heat moved down my throat and across my chest. I gripped the edge of the sink. Adrian reached for me, stopped himself, and asked, "Can I touch you?" The question came strained. I nodded. His hand closed around my forearm, steady and warm. The heat eased almost immediately. We both noticed. That is deeply inconvenient, I said. Adrian's thumb shifted once against my skin. You're joking. I'm trying not to panic. Something in his expression softened. Then keep talking. About what? Anything. Your bathroom has better lighting than my entire apartment. Noted. You're terrible at this. At bathrooms. Comfort. I'm learning. The answer was quiet enough to disarm me for half a second. Then footsteps sounded in the hall. Adrian released me and stepped between the doorway and where I stood. The movement was instinctive, protective, and completely infuriating. Nora entered carrying a tablet, and one look at my neck changed her entire face. She recovered quickly. No one outside this residence knows yet. Keep it that way, Adrian said, and suspend Evan's transportation. I turned to him. Excuse me. Nora glanced between us. Adrian did not. No vehicle leaves with him until we assess the threat. You don't get to cancel my car. I just did. There it was, the exact line I had feared since the mark appeared. Not mate. Not partner. Not even guest. A protected asset inside someone else's perimeter. Adrian reached for his phone. Increased security at the building. No staff changes. No external calls about the mark. Adrian. He finally looked at me. This is temporary. So was the contract. That stopped him. For 1 second, regret flickered across his face. But fear won. He gave Nora another instruction, and the machinery around him began to move. Doors secured. Calls redirected. Plans changed. My life rearranged in real time by a man who believed control was the same thing as care. The mark on my neck had made our fake relationship impossible to ignore. Adrian's response made something else equally clear. Whatever this bond meant, I was no longer free to walk away from it on my own terms. By 8 that morning, Adrian's penthouse had become the safest prison in the city. Nora had stationed 2 guards outside the private elevator, one in the hall and another near the windows, as if danger might rappel down from the roof just to improve my day. My phone still worked, technically. Every outgoing call passed through Adrian's security system. My clothes had arrived from my apartment in a garment bag I had not authorized. Even my landlord had received payment before I could object. I found Adrian in the kitchen, reading messages beside a breakfast no one had touched. You paid my rent. He looked up. The transfer was due. The contract payment was due. Calling my landlord was not. The eviction notice created a security exposure. My poverty is not a tactical weakness. Anything that can be used to pressure you is a tactical weakness. I stared at him. You make concerns sound deeply insulting. That isn't my intention. Your intentions are having a rough morning. The mark beneath my collar warmed when his jaw tightened. I hated that my body reacted to him even while I wanted to throw his expensive coffee through a window. Adrian pushed a plate toward me. Eat. Asked. A pause. Will you eat? See? Growth. I sat, mostly because anger was harder to maintain on an empty stomach. Adrian remained standing, scrolling through reports. What exactly are you looking for? I asked. Any change in communication since last night? Anyone asking about you? Anyone who noticed more than they should have? And have they? Grant Mercer requested a private meeting. My fork stopped. Adrian's face revealed nothing, which meant the answer mattered. Because of me? Possibly. That is information I should have had before you paid my rent and canceled my ride. I'm telling you now, after deciding what I'm allowed to do with it. Nora entered before Adrian could answer. She placed a tablet on the counter. We found an image from the reception. The photograph showed Adrian and me near the bar, his hand at my back, my face turned toward him. It looked intimate. Worse, it looked easy. That was posted? I asked. Privately circulated, Nora said, along with questions about whether Adrian's relationship changes certain alliances. So the danger is real. Adrian's voice stayed flat. Yes. I looked at the picture again. Someone had zoomed in on the side of my neck, though the mark had not existed yet. The caption beneath it asked whether Adrian Vale had finally acquired a vulnerability. My stomach tightened. Adrian noticed. His hand moved toward mine, then stopped against the edge of the counter. You see why leaving is not simple. I see why hiding information from me is unacceptable. I am trying to prevent panic. Mine or yours? Nora found sudden interest in the opposite wall. Adrian's gaze hardened. This is not a game, Evan. I know. That's why I'm done being the only person in the room without the rules. I reached for Nora's tablet. Adrian caught it. First. Not aggressively. Efficiently. The distinction did not help. Give it to me. There is material on this device you are not cleared to access. Material about the threat to my life. Material about my organization. Then show me what concerns me. No, the word was quiet and absolute. Something inside me snapped into focus. I had spent years surviving by making myself useful, invisible, easy to move around. Adrian had mistaken my need for money as proof I would keep adapting to whatever shape protected his plans. I stood. Fine. Where are you going? To solve the information problem. I took out my phone and opened the contact card Nora had used the day she found me at the cafe. You said all calls are monitored. Good. Then you can listen while I ask her questions you won't answer. Nora blinked. Adrian did not. Put the phone down. Ask. His nostrils flared. Will you put the phone down? No. I called Nora's secure line while she stood 3 feet away. Her phone rang. For one beautiful second, she looked like she might laugh. Adrian looked at her. Don't. He called me, she said. That is generally how phones work. I held up mine. Nora, what changed after last night? She glanced at Adrian, then back at me. 3 people altered their schedules. 2 requested confirmation of Adrian's travel. Mercer asked whether you would attend future functions. Why? Because if you are real, Adrian has something to protect. And if I'm fake, then someone may want to expose the deception. Adrian's expression had gone dangerously still, but he let her finish. That mattered. Not enough, but it mattered. Thank you, I said. I ended the call. Now I know enough to participate. You created an unnecessary risk. I asked a question in your kitchen. You challenged my chain of command. I'm not in your chain of command. The mark flared hot. Adrian crossed the space between us, then stopped before touching me. You're right. The words were so unexpected I almost missed them. About what? You are not one of my men. His voice dropped. But that means I have fewer ways to protect you, not fewer reasons. For a brief moment, the anger loosened. He poured coffee into a second cup and set it near me without asking how I took it. Black. No sugar. He remembered. You're terrible at apology, I said. That was not an apology. Then you're improving at coffee. His mouth moved, faintly. The room softened by half a degree. I hated how much relief that gave me. Later, Adrian allowed me into a limited security briefing. Limited was still his favorite word, but for 20 minutes he answered questions instead of dismissing them. I learned the real danger was not an immediate attack. It was uncertainty. People were testing how close they could get, how much Adrian would change his behavior, whether I altered his judgment. For the first time since the mark appeared, I felt less like luggage and more like someone inside the problem. Then a message arrived from my cafe manager. 2 unfamiliar men had come in asking when I worked next. Adrian read it over my shoulder. Everything in him changed. Nora, he said, move Evan to the North residence. I turned. What residence? A secure property outside the city. No, they found your workplace. Then we addressed that together. There is no together in this decision. The words came out before he could stop them. The warmth between us vanished. Nora stayed silent. Adrian reached for his phone. A car leaves in 20 minutes. Your apartment will be cleared. Your employment will be suspended until this is resolved. You cannot erase my life because you're scared. I can keep you alive. By taking everything else. His face tightened, but fear had already won. You'll leave today. The decision settled over the room like a locked door. For one morning, he had listened. For one brief hour, I had believed he might learn to treat me like a partner. Then danger touched something he cared about, and Adrian Vale did what he always did. He took control. This time, he took my home, my job, and my right to say no with it. For several seconds after Adrian said I would leave, no one in the kitchen moved. The city glowed behind him through the windows, bright and distant, as if my life had not just been reduced to a security itinerary. Say that again, I said. Adrian's face was unreadable. You'll be moved to the North residence until the threat is contained. No. The part where there is no together in this decision. His jaw tightened. Nora looked down at her tablet. Evan, you don't get to use my name like that after canceling my job and emptying my apartment. Your workplace has been compromised. Then protect it. I am protecting you. By removing everything that makes me a person? The mark at my neck burned, hot and steady. Adrian took one step toward me. I stepped back. He stopped immediately. That should have mattered. It did matter. Just not enough. The men at your cafe were not there by accident, he said. I know. You could be taken to pressure me. I know. Then why are we arguing? The question was quiet, almost exhausted. That hurt more than anger would have. Because you think danger ends the conversation. I pointed toward the tablet, the guards, the locked elevator beyond the hall. Every time you get scared, my choices disappear. This is not fear. Then what is it? Adrian said nothing. The silence answered for him. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You hired me because I wasn't connected to your world. You said I had no reason to betray you. What you meant was I had nothing you needed to respect. That is not true. Then prove it. His eyes met mine. How? Ask me what I want. The request seemed to stop him more effectively than any threat. Adrian could plan an extraction, secure a building, and make money move before breakfast. But asking left room for an answer he could not control. What do you want? He said at last. I want the truth before decisions are made about me. I want my phone without someone listening. I want my apartment left alone. I want the option to say no even when you think no is dangerous. And if your decision gets you killed, then help me make a better one. Don't erase me. Adrian looked away first. His hand closed around the back of a chair. You think I'm trying to own you. I think you don't know the difference between keeping someone and keeping them safe. The words landed hard. Nora quietly stepped out of the kitchen, taking the guards with her. The doors closed, leaving us alone in a room that suddenly felt too large. Adrian's voice dropped. People leave when protection becomes inconvenient. People also leave when protection becomes a cage. You don't understand what happens when I fail to control a threat. No, I understand exactly what happens when you decide control matters more than the person inside it. He flinched. Small. Real. For the first time, I saw the wound beneath the habit. Not the details. Not a confession. Just the shape of it. Adrian had built his whole life around preventing loss. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped asking whether the people he protected could breathe. I can keep you alive, he said. That is not the same as letting me live. The mark throbbed between us. I touched it, not because it hurt, but because I hated what it represented now. A connection I had never chosen. A reason everyone else thought Adrian had a claim. If I go to that house because you order me, what does this bond mean? I asked. Adrian's expression changed. It means you are connected to me. That is a fact, not an answer. I swallowed. If I stay because your guards block the door, if I take your money because you already solved my problems, if I let you make every decision because you call it protection, how would you ever know I chose any of it? His fingers tightened on the chair. I would know you were safe. You would know I was present. That broke something open in the silence. Adrian released the chair slowly. You want to leave? I looked toward the dark windows. A day ago, leaving had seemed simple. Money cleared. Contract finished. Go home. Now my apartment had been emptied, my job suspended, and men I had never met knew my face. Walking out would not restore the life I had before. It would only prove I could still move. I want the right to leave, I said. That isn't the same thing. Adrian stared at me. I forced myself not to hide behind a joke. I don't know what I want from you. That is the truth. I know I care what you think. I know I noticed when you asked before touching me. I know part of me felt safe when you stepped between me and Grant. My voice tightened. And I know every good thing between us starts to feel fake when you decide my consent is optional. He absorbed that without interruption. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its armor. I thought if I removed every risk, you would have no reason to be afraid. You removed me from the equation. Adrian looked down, and for once, he did not defend himself. Yes. The acknowledgement was barely louder than breath. It did not fix anything, but it was the first honest thing he had given me since the mark appeared. The move is canceled, he said. I went still. That is not the same as giving me freedom. I know. His eyes lifted to mine. I don't know how to do this correctly. Then stop doing it alone. The words came out softer than I intended. Adrian took a step forward, then stopped at the distance I had chosen. If I open every door, he said, you may walk through one. Yes. Fear moved visibly across his face before control covered it again. This time, I knew what I was seeing. And if you close them, I said, I will never know whether I stayed because I wanted you or because you made leaving impossible. Adrian said nothing. The bond connected us, but the room felt wider than ever. I walked past him toward the guest room, and he did not follow. At the doorway, I stopped. Canceling the car was easy, I said. Giving me the choice back won't be. Behind me, Adrian's answer came low and steady. I understand. I hoped he did, because the threat outside had not disappeared, and neither had the mark on my neck. But the next decision could not belong to Adrian alone. If there was any future for us beyond a contract and a bond neither of us had asked for, he would have to risk losing me. And I would have to decide what freedom meant when walking away was no longer the only way to prove I had it. Adrian gave me my freedom back before sunrise, and for once, he did it without asking whether I planned to use it. When I stepped out of the guest room, the guards were gone from the hall. My phone sat on the kitchen counter beside my wallet, my keys, and a printed list of every security measure attached to my name. Each one had been marked canceled. Adrian stood near the windows in the same clothes he had worn the night before, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his face pale with exhaustion. The elevator is unlocked, he said. Your apartment has not been cleared. Your manager has been told your suspension was an error. I looked at the list. And the calls. No monitoring. The car. Available if you request it. Not assigned. Every answer cost him something. I could hear it in the careful spaces between words. What changed? I asked. Adrian's gaze held mine. You were right. No explanation. No attempt to make the admission smaller. About which part? All of it. Before I could answer, Nora entered from the private office with a tablet in one hand. Her expression was controlled, but urgency moved beneath it. Mercer requested the meeting again. This time he sent terms. Adrian took the tablet. I watched his face go still. What terms? He handed it to me without hesitation. That alone felt like a door opening. The message was short. Grant Mercer claimed the men at my cafe were only observers. He wanted Adrian to withdraw from an alliance vote scheduled that afternoon. In exchange, he would stop circulating questions about me and remove my name from any future pressure. He's using me to change your decision, I said. Yes. And if you refuse, he will continue testing access to you. Nora corrected herself. To Evan. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he did not take the tablet back. What happens if you accept? I asked. I lose control of 3 distribution routes and weaken everyone who supported me. So he wins. Temporarily. I looked at him. What would the old version of you do? Nora became very interested in the tablet's empty case. Adrian answered anyway. Move you somewhere secure. Refuse the terms. Remove Mercer's ability to continue. And the current version? Give you the information. Ask what you choose. The mark under my collar warmed, not burning this time, just present. I hated that the simple act of being asked felt revolutionary. What choices do I actually have? Adrian nodded once. You can leave now. Nora can arrange independent. Security under your control, paid in advance with no reporting to me. You can return home without protection. Or you can stay and help decide how we respond. And if I walk out? His silence lasted one breath too long. I will not stop you. There it was. The thing he feared most, offered without conditions. Not because the danger had disappeared. Because my consent finally mattered more than his certainty. Nora quietly placed a second phone on the counter. Mercer expects an answer in 30 minutes. Adrian looked at me. You do not owe me participation. You really need a less alarming way to say kind things. I'm working on it. The faint dryness in his voice almost made me smile. Almost. I read Mercer's message again. Walking away would prove Adrian had opened the door. It would not prove I knew what I wanted on the other side. If I stay, I said, I'm not bait. No, I'm in the room for every decision that involves me. Yes. And if I say your plan is unacceptable, then we find another. Nora's eyebrows lifted slightly. Apparently, this was new for everyone. I set the tablet down. Then let's answer him. Adrian did not move. Be certain. I am. The bond is not a reason. I know. The money is not a reason. I know that too. I stepped closer, stopping at the distance I chose. I'm staying because you unlocked the elevator when every instinct you have told you not to. Don't ruin the moment by arguing. Something in his face broke open, not relief exactly, because relief would have been too easy. It was hope with nowhere safe to stand. We built the response together. Adrian refused to withdraw from the alliance vote. I insisted Mercer receive a direct statement that I was not property, leverage, or an asset attached to Adrian's position. Nora added enough strategic weight to make the message impossible to dismiss as emotion. Then Adrian did the part that changed everything. He released proof that Mercer's men had approached my workplace and sent it to the alliance members before Mercer could control the story. It exposed Adrian's vulnerability, confirmed I mattered to him, and gave up the advantage of secrecy. It also turned Mercer's pressure into evidence that he could not be trusted with anyone's loyalty. The cost was immediate. Adrian lost the protection of ambiguity. Everyone in his world would now know I was real to him. But Mercer lost the room. Within minutes, 2 alliance members withdrew support from his demand. A third requested an investigation. Nora's phone began vibrating nonstop. He's cornered, she said. Not removed, Adrian replied, but contained. The danger did not vanish. It changed shape. More importantly, Adrian had not solved it by locking me away. He had solved it by trusting me with the risk. When Nora left to manage the fallout, the penthouse went quiet again. Adrian stood across from me, close enough to reach, far enough to let me decide. You can still leave, he said. I know. I won't use the bond to keep you. I know. I don't expect trust to return because I made one correct decision. That was the first thing he said that made me believe it might. I crossed the remaining distance and held out my hand. Adrian looked at it before looking at me. This is not a contract, I said. No. And it's not forgiveness for everything. I understand. It's a choice to see what happens next. He took my hand carefully, like freedom was something fragile he had finally learned not to close his fist around. Then I choose that too, he said. The mark warmed beneath my skin, but for the first time, it did not feel like a claim. It felt like a question we had both answered for ourselves. For a while, neither of us moved. Adrian's hand stayed around mine without tightening, and that mattered more than any vow he could have made. The elevator remained unlocked behind me. My keys were still on the counter. Nothing prevented me from leaving except the fact that I no longer wanted freedom to mean distance. So, I said, because apparently I handled life-changing emotional decisions by making them sound inconvenient. What happens now? Adrian glanced at our joined hands. You tell me. That answer must be physically painful for you. More than you know. I smiled despite myself. It was small, tired and real. First, I go home. Something in his face tightened, but he did not argue. All right. You can arrange security options. Options, Adrian. I choose which one. Understood. My job stays mine. My apartment stays mine. My phone stays private. Yes. And no paying people behind my back, because you've decided my bills are hostile forces. His gaze dropped briefly. The rent was already, I know. We'll discuss your aggressive approach to housing stability later. The corner of his mouth moved. There will be a later? I looked at him. For all his power, the question was almost careful. Yes, I said. There will be a later. 3 days after Mercer's attempt collapsed, I returned to my apartment with one security consultant I had chosen, a new lock I had approved, and no armed men in my hallway. Adrian came with me because I invited him. He stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by second-hand furniture and a stack of unopened mail, looking more out of place than I had at Marlowe House. Try not to intimidate the lamp, I told him. It appears unstable. It cost $12. That explains it. He took off his coat and waited. That was new. Adrian used to enter a room and immediately decide how it should function. Now he looked at me before touching anything, even the box of clothes his staff had packed and returned. Can I help? He asked. You can put the kitchen things back. Where? In the kitchen. His expression went flat. I meant which cabinets. I know. I wanted to enjoy the moment. We unpacked in an awkward rhythm that slowly became easy. Adrian handled every glass like it contained evidence. I folded shirts while he arranged mugs by size until I informed him that my home was not accepting a military occupation. He moved them back. Not perfectly, just enough to prove he had listened. Later, he found the original contract tucked inside the folder Nora had returned. He held it by one corner. Do you want this? I looked at my signature beneath the terms that had once promised one clean night and no future obligation. The payment had cleared exactly as agreed. I had used it to settle the rent, fix my car, and silence the collection agency. Adrian had never mentioned the money again. He had not treated it as gratitude owed or proof that I belonged to him. It was payment for work. Nothing more. Keep it, I said. His brows lifted. Why? Evidence. Of what? That you once needed 3 pages of legal language to ask someone to stand next to you. Adrian looked at the contract, then at me. You agreed. I was under financial distress. You negotiated 6 revisions. I was distressed with standards. The laugh that left him was quiet, surprised, and completely unguarded. I wanted to remember that sound more than I wanted to remember the mark appearing. A week later, I went back to the cafe. My manager complained about the security review, then hugged me hard enough to erase the complaint. Adrian did not suspend my schedule. He did not buy the building. He did not station a convoy outside. He sat at a corner table with black coffee and no sugar, pretending not to watch every person who entered. You know, I told him during my break, most boyfriends just text when they're worried. Is that what I am? You're fishing. I'm asking. That was new too. Adrian Vale, who had once turned concern into an order, now waited for an answer. I sat across from him and touched the mark beneath my collar. It no longer burned when I was afraid. Sometimes it warmed when he was close, a quiet reminder of something neither of us had planned. Boyfriend feels temporary, I said. His attention sharpened. Mate feels like biology making decisions for us. Then what do you prefer? I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Partner. Adrian turned his palm beneath mine. Partner, he repeated. Not possession. Not protection without permission. A word with room for 2 people inside it. We were not suddenly perfect. Adrian still tried to solve problems before I finished describing them. I still used jokes when honesty felt too exposed. The difference was that he caught himself. I stayed in the conversation. He asked. I answered. Sometimes I said no, and the world did not end. Sometimes I let him help, and I did not become a debt he owned. The first night I chose to stay at his penthouse, he stopped outside the guest room and looked at me. Which room? He asked. The question carried every mistake between us and every choice after. I took his hand and led him past the guest room. Mine, I said. Tonight. He did not assume tomorrow. That was why tomorrow became possible. Months later, the mark on my neck was still the first thing strangers noticed when Adrian and I entered a room together. They saw proof of a bond. They saw the Mafia boss and the man beside him. They did not see the unlocked elevator, the returned keys, the questions asked instead of orders given, or the 1,000 ordinary decisions that made the bond mean something. I had been paid to pretend to be Adrian Vale's mate for one night. The mark appeared without my permission. Love did not. Love came later. In every moment he gave me a choice, and every moment I used that freedom to choose him back.